The Expanded University, imaginative and boundless. Welcome to Expanded University. I am Tim, the founder, dean, and sole tenured professor. I know the Lord of the Core, I storage in the origin, and I've got the library of truth. Thanks for being here tonight on a Wednesday night for an Expanded University Live. We've actually been doing quite a few of these. I'd wager that over the last 2 months, we've done more than we had done in about a year and a half, something like that. So I'm glad to do these. They're fun and they're informative, and they keep the conversation going about real Star Wars. Share the stream on all platforms, guys. This is an evergreen topic. It's going to be out there forever. But tonight we want to fill up the chat. Share the stream out there on every single social media platform that you can. Darth Spamton is joining us tonight, greeting the other spacers. OG Star Wars, top tier member of the channel, as is Darth Spamton in the house. If you are interested in joining, then click on that join button and check out the perks. Speaking of which, we have a new member. The Gatekeeper's Daimyo has become a new member at the Spacer Recruit level. Thank you very much for joining the channel. That's worth playing something for. What should we play that is Star Wars related? Need more Star Wars clips. We need more Star Wars clips. Well, we have Princess Leia here.
He is what he is. That's the thing. He doesn't pretend to be anything else. He doesn't feel the need to be charming or anything. He's just an unpretentious, very straightforward guy.
Thank you very much, Gatekeeper's Daimyo, for joining the channel. We have got Melissa Lord, another top tier member of the channel and the first ever member of the channel, with us tonight. We have Steezo for Life, member of the channel. Star Wars Marvel purist Justin is with us, and I agree. Hit that like button, guys. Soul Assassin, our mod, is with us. Make sure you click on all the links that he provides tonight, please. There are the custom emojis you can use if you join the channel. Empire's Ass, Retard Rhino, Expanded University, Palpy Kane, and so on. King Chris in the house. We've got Small Time Republic with us. You've been reading the Star Wars West End Games RPG books in PDF for a while. They made over 100 in a 12-year period. I think it's quite north of 100, to be quite honest. I'll have to get that number in the next couple of days. Tuscan Bob is in the house. Darth Prime is with us. Scroll back up and make sure I didn't miss anyone here. But share the stream out there, guys. It's going to be awesome. We're talking about this publication right here, the Imperial Sourcebook. This is from, I believe, 1989. Yes, it still has the little sticker on it dated 6/90. That's when Grapevine Comics and Cards in Northern Stockton California, got this in stock, and I bought it off of the shelf. Had it ever since. At the time, there was really nothing like this out there that was exploring new territory. You had the Star Wars Guide to the Star Wars Universe that came out right after Return of the Jedi, but it was basically just collecting information that was already out there in the movies, in the radio dramas, in the novels by Brian Daley, L. Neil Smith, but nothing really new. Well, this book right here just forged new territory, right? West End Games was giving a bit of a mandate to create new lore with some guardrails. And that's what they did. And we're going to get into that and see how accurate it was once the prequels came out. It's almost making me wonder, did they get some kind of manuscript? I would love to get with some of these guys and interview them. Greg Gordon is on the byline here, but many people worked on all of these early books. I actually emailed in research for one of my videos, the How Did the Expanded Universe Get Its Name video that's about 3 years old at this point. I emailed Bill Slavicsek, and he actually replied to me. So I'd love to interview some of these guys and get some of the facts, like what kind of information and guidance were they given by Lucasfilm at the time. Scourge is in the house. Preston's here. Share the stream on all platforms. Appreciate it, guys. Leaf Larson's with us. Been a long time member of the channel and supporter. Thank you very much, sir. So yeah, this book, it forged new territory, created new ships. It defined stuff that hadn't been defined before. So we'll start getting into that. This may be a multiple parter because there's also a Rebel Alliance source book that did the same thing. And quite honestly, before those two, there was just the source book that came out after the rule book in 1987. And it defined a lot of stuff too. How does hyperspace work? Who built the ships, like the manufacturers, all that type of stuff. So we're going to start with the Imperial Sourcebook, though. Really quick here, Preston asks, what's your favorite one out of the original trilogy? Empire Strikes Back. Yep. I like Empire. Very close second, though, is A New Hope. And I watched the unaltered versions that I had on DVD from, what was it, 2006? They were released as a bonus disc. That's what I watch. Because it's what I'm used to. If you want to watch the special editions, then more power to you. So what I have here, I'm not going to read out of this book. I have a PDF format of the original edition because they did come out with a second edition. They changed some of the rules in West End Games with the second edition, and I think it was 92, 93, and they updated some of the source books. Well, we're going to read from the original, but I do have a PDF of the new one open in case we want to compare anything. I really didn't like the format of the new ones. The layouts and stuff just looked a little too generic and modern compared to the classic one that I was holding in my hands earlier. Corey Cochran's with us. So let me throw this up on the screen here. Here it is. So you got that awesome cover, which I believe this shot, I could grab it off the shelf, the Return of the Jedi storybook for kids. This is in there somewhere. I remember this iconic shot from 1983 when I was in second grade. Return of the Jedi was the biggest thing ever. Just amazing design. So it actually has an opening crawl. And by the way, I'm doing a series on the expandeduniverse.com. I'm running a little bit behind. I've only done the rule book for West End Games. I'm working on a script for the source book. And these are just articles, right? I'll get to this one next, and then I'll get to the next one. I'm going to try and just go in chronological order of publication. It's going to take a while, but been really busy. But yeah, they have an opening crawl, which is pretty cool. So does the source book and possibly even the core rule book. I'll have to go back and check. Dan Blackroyd, aka Liquid Blake, is in the house. But let's read this. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, it is a dark time for the rebellion. Although the Death Star has been destroyed, Imperial forces have instituted a reign of terror among the disheartened worlds of the Galactic Empire. The Empire has many weapons in its arsenal, and every one of them has been turned upon the rebels and their allies. Tyranny, oppression, vast fleets, overwhelming armies, and fear. Fear keeps the individual systems in line, replacing the Imperial Senate and the Death Star as the prime motivator in the New Order. The upstart Rebel Alliance has dared win a significant battle against the Empire at Yavin. But the war has really just begun. Outnumbered and outgunned, the rebellion nevertheless burns across 1,000 worlds, flaming into a fire of hope. But the Emperor has ordered this fire extinguished, setting the war machine he has constructed into motion. This is the galaxy of Star Wars. So you got that credits page here with another just iconic imagery from Return of the Jedi. You get the black and dark blue hues, right? With the Death Star and the Empire in Return of the Jedi, which is just amazing. We're going to have to zoom in a little bit here. And then, of course, you have Ralph McQuarrie's Imperial City concept art, which originally that planet was going to be named Alderaan, probably among other things, if I remember correctly. So Coruscant wasn't come up with until 1990-91 when Timothy Zahn used it to name the planet that Imperial City was on. And just so you know, one of the moons of Yavin has a mining base that mines Coressa stones from Yavin. So they shine. And Coruscate is a word, and that's kind of where he came up with the name, which is pretty cool. And they decided to use that name in The Phantom Menace. Because why rename something that already has a really cool name? So base George Lucas there. So that's Ralph McQuarrie's concept art from the early 80s for Imperial City that they never wound up using for any of the movies until obviously later on with the special edition and the celebration victory after the Empire was defeated. Yeah, they have shit transfers, but hey, it's what I'm going to watch. So the introduction here just kind of sets the stage for what the book is about, what era it's set in. And early on, all of the West End games, adventures, and stuff were set between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, because that was the most fertile ground for storytelling, right? During that time. That's basically what this introduction is doing. Then a lot of the books had these prologues, and they were written in universe, either from our whole Hextraphon or from what's his name, Vorin Nal, and both of them were Rebel Alliance historians, right? Well, this is a memo from Hextraphon to Mon Mothma, and it's pretty funny how they do this, because they kind of set up a caveat in the event that maybe they get something wrong further on down the line, which they didn't really get a lot of that, to be quite honest. But it says, to Mon Mothma, Alliance Supreme Commander, other Alliance officers, from Major Arhol Hextraphon, Executive Secretary and Master Historian, Alliance High Command, regarding the following Imperial data. The research you have had my staff and I undertake concerning the events surrounding the Battle of Yavin has uncovered some startling information. I have compiled all the intercepted communiques, technical readouts, holochips, and data packs into one report. Sources for this material include high-level communications, reports by various Imperial agencies, personal data logs, top-secret performance records, and other similar material. While the information reveals much about the tactics and inner workings of our enemy, I must caution reading too much into this report at this time. None of the information contained herein has been confirmed or documented outside the data presented here. Unlikely though it is, this could be an elaborate ruse to pass along false information to the Alliance. So there it is. They're kind of setting it up. Hey, it's 1989. 88, whenever they were developing this book, they're writing it. They don't know what's going to happen if Lucas ever makes more movies and stuff like that. So it's kind of genius the way that they did this. And this is the next several pages. This is really what I want to get into tonight. This was really good stuff. It's like, did they get some kind of manuscript for what he was going to do in the prequels? That's what it made me wonder. So we're going to get into this part really heavy. Liquid Blake says, big fan of the Doug Chiang concept art and designs for the Phantom Menace. Yeah, shocker there. It's good stuff. And he definitely looked up to Macquarie as an idol. I've been watching the backstage clips and stuff from my super duper saga set. Obviously the pre-Disney saga set. And he's pretty prominent in those. Yeah, that was one of the names. I think it was Hab Abaddon is what it was. Yeah. It had a couple of different names. And so did characters, to be honest. So here we go. Chapter 1, a primer on Imperial power. There is a darkness in the galaxy. There is the Galactic Empire, where once peace held dominion over the countless planets of the Old Republic. And by the way, Old Republic, proper noun, right? Old Republic. These days, it's been dropped in what they're currently calling Star Wars. They don't use the term Old Republic, despite the fact that it's spoken in dialogue, especially by Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope. It's really interesting that they've dropped it. I don't know what's going on with that. Now fear and terror hold sway. Planets set to defend themselves against any external menace. Ooh, that's interesting. Were ill prepared to deal with threats from within. And so a galaxy was enslaved. And one thing I'm going to just call out here, the very beginning of the first page of the Star Wars novelization, the A New Hope novelization from 1976, 7 months before the movie came out, it kind of sets the stage for a lot of what they're going to talk about here in the next couple of pages about how the Republic had fallen, basically. So they had that to go on at the very least. So I want to acknowledge that. And so a galaxy was enslaved. The idea of empire was old throughout the galaxy long before Palpatine ascended the throne and created his new order. Hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of worlds have a history of empire, of rule by a single central authority in their past. Look at the AT-ATs system, for example. The principal planet still recalls the Ketel-Far dynasty with pride. These rulers unified the entire homeworld, eliminating opposition and establishing a golden age. This tale is typical of imperial legends and histories throughout the galaxy, containing those elements that are common to intergalactic memory. Few recall the negative aspects of the imperial rule, preferring to remember the power and glory that comes from an overarching code of law and a common tongue. So you kind of look at Rome, right? A lot of people want to look to Imperial Rome as a model. Some people do. So this is drawn from real life here. None of these historical empires still stand, but their memories lingered, lying dormant in the minds of billions of beings who longed for a simpler galaxy, who sought certainty and order, who wanted to belong to the most powerful empire of all. These seeds of ideas were waiting for a more fertile time, for an ambitious leader to cultivate them once again. The old republic wanes. The galaxy was once a great republic of stars. The thousand member worlds were governed fairly and efficiently by the Senate and cared for and protected by the Jedi Knights. Inevitably, as the number of worlds increased, the Republic found itself saddled with too massive a bureaucracy. It had grown too large, gotten too old, and corruption had set in. Right? So we see that in The Phantom Menace, right out of the gate. In the opening crawl, we see that. And we saw that in that little blurb in the A New Hope novelization. A few unscrupulous, greedy senators had started the destructive chain reaction of malaise. They saw the first lingering problems as cracks in the system of government, which could be exploited for personal gain. These beings found that their colleagues were far too occupied by the day-to-day running of the Republic to monitor their activities adequately. The corruption was too small to be noticed at first, but as opportunities grew, so did the number of senators who were seduced by the lure of illegitimate power and wealth. These senators found an easy alliance with some of the mammoth corporate interests, which constantly were on the lookout for easier ways to make a profit. So there you go. You got the Trade Federation, right? In the Phantom Menace, you go into Attack of the Clones, and you've got the Techno Union. You've got, what are the names of those other organizations? The Corporate Alliance, the Banking Clan. You have all those guys, right? So there it is right there. A few arrogant, self-serving bureaucrats fell to seduction, and suddenly a virus was in the stars. Every instance of instability, each uncertainty in government action, every wrinkle in senatorial policy and procedure became a means to foster larger opportunities. Senator turned on senator, values eroded, trusts were broken, and fear gripped the Republic. What was once thought to be immortal suddenly saw the approach of its own destruction, and the old Republic was afraid. Corruption and fear spread like a mutant disease, quickly reaching epidemic proportions without any visible cause. The old Republic's troubles multiplied, and no one seemed to know what was happening or why. At last, the Senate could no longer blind itself to the fact that the old Republic was being devoured from within by those who had been entrusted with its care. During this time, the legitimate business of the Republic was neglected. Small, previously routine matters became insurmountable difficulties. There you go again. Think about some of those scenes with Supreme Chancellor Valorum in the Senate. Like nothing can get resolved. No bills can get passed. Somebody's using some obscure procedure to block the debate. Stuff like that. We saw it on screen. The government became remote, unfathomable, often a useless burden to tens of thousands of the governed races. The Republic was disintegrating, and it appeared that no one could hold it together. The rise of Senator Palpatine. Let's see what you guys are saying really quick here. Yeah, that was a pretty cool scene when they brought this statue down. Yeah, the old Republic, not the High Republic. Or just the Republic. The Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the old Republic. Love that line. Disney would have had Obi-Wan say High Republic. Yeah, probably. You're probably right. Palpatine, an unassuming senator, began his road to power during this time of social injustice and rampant corruption. Palpatine was self-effacing and, despite a record of showing promise, was mostly ineffective in the Senate. His prodding, methodical way seemed at odds with the mercurial shifts of power and agendas which were the reality of the collapsing Senate. Palpatine failed to take advantage of opportunities for placement on important advisory boards and powerful committees. He was noted as a keen observer, but he was reluctant to present his observations unless pressed by his colleagues. The senator rose slowly, hampered by an apparent lack of ambition. His only notable achievement was a remarkable absence of enemies, attributed as much to his weakness within the Senate as to his unimposing personality. So there it is. Brilliantly portrayed by Sir Ian McDiarmid, right? I believe he's been knighted. Ian McDiarmid. Brilliantly portrayed. Because when he played the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, do you think he had any idea? I don't think he did. I read an interview with him in one of the insiders several months back that I have on the shelf here. I don't think he expected to get called back, and he did. So it's almost like he read this or something that they used to write this to know how to play the character. If anyone ever tells you that the prequels suck, point to Palpatine as what makes it awesome. Just that whole arc. What we're reading right now, just this really wimpy kind of happy-go-lucky senator that is really the most evil force in the universe, in the galaxy, right? That's just badass. And his performance in all three films is just top-notch. And it's describing it right here in the Imperial Sourcebook. But it was all a ruse. For Palpatine was more than he appeared to be, much more. And don't forget, at this time, nobody knew, except perhaps George Lucas himself, that Palpatine was a Sith. All we knew was, hey, Darth Vader, he's Dark Lord of the Sith. What does it even mean? We didn't know it was this order that was passed down generation by generation, all that. We didn't know that there used to be an army of Sith because Tales of the Jedi was still several years away when this was being written. So he was a dark side force user, as we saw in Return of the Jedi, but we didn't know that he was a Sith. I made a whole video on that. It wasn't until right before Phantom Menace came out that that was acknowledged. And in one of the comics, it revealed that he went to Korriban or wherever and was looking at some Sith artifacts and stuff like that. The disintegration of the Senate continued, exhausting the entire Republic. On the constituent world, civil unrest was now commonplace and crime blossomed. Some worlds threatened secession. There you go. They don't call it the Clone Wars on this page because, quite frankly, they weren't allowed to really talk about the Clone Wars, just like Zahn wasn't. He went too far, in my opinion. But there it is. Secession happened. What did we see right out of the gate? An Attack of the Clones in the opening crawl. There it is. Others pledged their loyalty over the hypermedia while doing what they pleased. The uncorrupt senators realized the danger to the Republic and all it stood for. The corrupt senators could see the need for stability, if only to preserve as much of the Republic as possible for future plundering. A void existed, and it demanded to be filled. Senator Palpatine seized the moment through fraud, clever promises, and astute political maneuvering. Palpatine had himself elected head of the Senatorial Council, President of the Republic. We saw it in the film. That's what the Phantom Menace was about. Getting himself elected. That's what the whole film was about. He was the Phantom Menace, right? And that's exactly what happened. Brilliant. If you look at that whole plot, taxation of trade routes, all that stuff, it really is, it's a brilliant plot to get himself elected. And, you know, kind of some of the lines, like who's up for to be elected, Bail Antilles of Alderaan. Can't think of the other guy's name. So he got himself elected because he was seen as like a safe choice, right? Plus, they could play victim at Naboo based on what happened with the Trade Federation invading their world. Brilliant stuff. And by the way, President of the Republic, that also comes from the A New Hope novelization blurb, but Lucas changed it to be Supreme Chancellor, obviously. The Loyalists, and that's a term used in Attack of the Clones. The Loyalists were encouraged that Palpatine had not fallen in with the corrupt senators during his tenure, while the fallen senators took heart from Palpatine's apparent docility. Each side believed Palpatine would serve their needs. Each side could not have been more wrong. See what you guys are saying here. A Sith Lord? Admiral Screed is with us. Prequel haters are stupid and I have no respect for them. I agree. Totally agree. A New Hope is second best. Yeah, I agree with that. Justin's back. Thanks for loving Expanded University. We got to start doing more with this. Like, I've had t-shirt ideas and all that stuff since I debuted Expanded University. Next month will be 3 years. We need to start doing more with that. Definitely. George is the GOAT. The Phantom Menace is probably the most underrated Star Wars film. Yeah, It is. Ask Blake about it. You can't tell Blake it isn't. Yeah, and there's the playlist. Expanded University. That should include videos and live streams in that playlist. Lots of stuff from the past 3 years now. Stuff, I try to make videos on stuff you might not have heard of, not just, oh, here's a video on Han Solo. It's like, okay, there's a million of those out there. Let me talk about something you might not have heard about. That's what I try to do with Expanded University. We'll read this and then we'll continue here. You can just tell how much the EU authors knew and understood George's universe. Cloak of Deception is... Oh, yeah, another great one. Ties right in. Although not Luceno's best, it set up Valorum as the fall guy as well. I actually like that novel more than some of Luceno's other novels, to be quite honest. The New Order. The new president exceeded everyone's expectations. In the midst of chaos, the previously underrated senator began the wheels of government turning again after too long a delay. Saw it in the films. He proved to be an efficient leader, restoring many of the policies which had lapsed during the waning years. His power supplanted that of the Senate, in these policies only. But as the Senate turned a greater portion of its attention to the internecine struggle, more and more government functions were given over to Palpatine. We see that in the films. We really see it in the novelization of Revenge of the Sith. And maybe a little bit behind the scenes in Attack of the Clones. You know, creating an army, Grand Army of the Republic, all that stuff. The senators of each faction found themselves establishing political debts to Palpatine. The president was the only being in the Republic who seemed capable of getting anything done. Palpatine's power grew. An even greater number of worlds accepted the president as the voice of the Republic. It was in this climate of trust that Palpatine declared his new order and named himself Emperor. So we know how it happens now in Revenge of the Sith, right? But it doesn't contradict what we're reading here. There just isn't as much specificity in it when you read it right here. But it's in line with it. Skillfully evoking images of the glories of empires past, which he did in that speech, right? The First Galactic Empire, as well as promising to lead the Republic into a height unparalleled in galactic history. Palpatine gained ultimate power without any real opposition. When the senators realized what had transpired, they were too weak from their own infighting to mount an effective challenge. Those too vocal were silenced. Those considered dangerous were rendered harmless by whatever means were convenient. Darkness and tyranny spread slowly but continuously, entrenching itself across more and more worlds before anyone realized the danger. The Empire was born. Palpatine promised to eradicate the corruption and social injustice of the previous galactic government. Instead, he gave the people a program that's main goal was to subjugate as many planetary governments in the galaxy as possible for the personal benefit and glory of the Emperor. He reneged on his promises to the people and instituted a reign of terror and even greater social injustice. The old Republic was consumed, and out of that rotted body rose the new order. There you go. That's what happened. The structure of the Empire. The Empire is still growing. Policies of expansion established by the Old Republic were never rescinded, and exploration, and now conquest, continues. The Imperial Survey Corps, scientists and scouts charged with exploring the galaxy, has seen its funds cut sharply over the years. Still, a new system is being cataloged for the Empire every 207 minutes by the understaffed ISC. Most of the recently surveyed worlds have remained untouched by Imperial colonization. The Empire has little use for an expanding frontier. Frontier settlements offer greater freedom to Imperial citizens and stretch Imperial forces even further. That is not in the best interest of the Empire. So, in a lot of these West End books, they have these, you don't want to call them short stories, but they're these little narrative blurb type things. And it's pretty freaking cool. A lot of them are cool, and they'll do like scenes that were off camera in Empire Strikes Back. If you look at Galaxy Guide 3, The Empire Strikes Back, stuff like that. And some of them are just kind of out of the blue, like this one right here. Let's read this, and then I'll kind of ask you a question at the end. By his own hand, look at the stars. They have been out there forever, hanging like diamonds upon the ebony velvet of space. The stars were there when the old Republic reached for glory. They waited, turning their sparkling lights inward when the Republic reached too far and collapsed from its own sanctimonious weight. They cheered when the Senate practically begged Palpatine to take control of the Council. Then the stars watched admiringly as the President used subterfuge, bribery, and terror to name himself Emperor. And I watched too. My name is not important, as all that I am is dwarfed by the bright darkness that is the Emperor. But I have always been near him, a servant, a happy slave. It is sufficient enough for me to be close to his power, to feel it reach out to me. That is all I ask for. That is all I am granted. The stars, I stare beyond the portal and view their glory. They are all his. More glorious still, they are his by his own hand, the Emperor. It has a certain ring to it, that majestic title, Emperor. The weak Republic had crumbled, but the Empire burns with a fire that will never be quenched. Nothing can destroy the Emperor's glory or his glorious reign. The Emperor has taught me what others refuse to believe. The dark forces are strongest. He knew it all along, even back in those days when he was a lowly senator. And he has shared that knowledge with me. Have you seen ambitious officers betray their superiors for inconsequential favors? Have you heard the secrets of local governments and how to bypass their defenses from the lips of weak, principled functionaries? Have you known sadistic gangsters, power-hungry politicians, greedy landlords? Then you know the truth too. Everyone craves the darkness. The Emperor has simply recognized this truth, and with recognition comes utilization for his own aggrandizement. For he is the black center of the Empire. He is the Emperor. He is the galaxy. And I, like so many others, are content to serve in the shadow of his dark fire. Who do you think this person is? Do you think it's one of the advisors? Not very many of them were named at that point, to be quite honest. It's not Vader's voice. Couldn't be Vader. It's got to be kind of just some random advisor. That's my guess. Yeah, social injustice. Well, I'm glad you made it to your daughter's house. I, as well, have a turkey marinating in brine. It will be put on the smoker at 6 o'clock in the morning to be consumed around 1 o'clock in the afternoon tomorrow. So that's not really our Thanksgiving dinner. It'll be on Saturday. This is just kind of a smaller gathering. Glad you made it safe. Yeah, Sate Pestage. I think he was the first one. I do believe he was named in the Empire Strikes Back novelization. Maybe, maybe not, but I think his name was definitely in the script and stuff. So, and you had Kinman Doriana. There were a lot of them. All right. However, an ISC team occasionally turns up an inhabited world in the process of cataloging. Inhabited worlds mean taxes and other valuable resources for the Empire. These worlds are initially offered a place in the New Order, provided they agree to fall in line with the will of the Emperor. If a world refuses or reneges on its oath of allegiance, then the Empire resorts to military conquest. Usually, the threat implied by the massive Imperial war machine is enough to inspire unswerving fealty in even the most independent worlds. So it kind of goes into the citizenry and the laws and stuff. And here's what I found interesting. The least restrictive areas in the galaxy tend to be in the galactic core and the Outer Rim territories. Those areas in between find themselves under the greatest amount of scrutiny and therefore face the brunt of Imperial authority. So at the time, they really hadn't named the mid-rim, the inner rim, the expansion region, the colonies. They really hadn't named that. I don't think they did that until the second edition semi-map that they came out with of the slice. So I think their logic here is in the core, a lot of loyalists to the Old Republic and then the Empire after it, so there wasn't a need for restrictive laws. And then in the Outer Rim, it was hard to enforce, right? So there wasn't a lot of enforcement. You look at Tatooine, places like that. But in between, you get into the colonies, mid-rim, further away from the core. Maybe they don't want to be under the thumb of the Empire. I think that's what the author's logic was there. Let's see. Yeah, and this is what's smart right here. The Empire has not completely altered the governments of hundreds of thousands of worlds. Such a task would be impractical. The Emperor has left it to his advisors to modify the portions of a planetary government, be it government procedure or members of the ruling body, to conform to the will of the Empire. Less than one planet in 80 has been so modified. The preferred option is to let the planet run itself, much as it has had for years, but maintaining a visible Imperial presence so that the rulers know who their ultimate master is. The Empire is also encourages that constituent planets reform their own governments to conform to the Imperial method. In this way, individual worlds eliminate laws and freedoms, replacing them with doctrines and statutes more in line with Imperial edicts. So, yeah, there's no way that you can occupy every single planet in your empire, right? You just can't. So they use fear and, hey, run your damn planet whatever way you want as long as you pay your taxes and you don't rebel. That's what made sense. The governors. Planetary governors are Imperial agents who represent the Empire's authority on a single world. Usually that representation extends to an entire system, giving him jurisdiction of all the planets orbiting a single star. A governor has command of all Imperial troops garrisoned on his planets. This command extends only nominally to the political and intelligence arms of the military, which operate as if a governor's orders were well-intentioned suggestions. The Imperial Navy is supposed to consult with the governor whenever they are on maneuvers or engaging hostiles in his system, and to carefully consider the advice the governor can provide. The Navy routinely ignores this and most other forms of protocol when dealing with the planetary governors, unless the governor is well supported by a MOF. The Navy considers governors to be too concerned with the welfare of their planet to be of much use in a crisis. And they're appointed by the Emperor's advisors. A few are just hollow approvals of candidates the Emperor has chosen. So basically, Imperial governors are there just to oversee and make sure the planet is conforming to what we talked about earlier, right? Paying their taxes and not rebelling. Then it goes into sectors. Everyone's heard about sectors. So originally a cluster of star systems with approximately 50 inhabited planets was a sector, but it grew beyond that and became really political, where you have much larger sectors than others, and they were crossing over each other, overlapping, all that kind of stuff. And then you get into MOFs. A MOF is the being in charge of an entire sector. The planetary governors of a sector are under a MOF's control, and a MOF reports to an advisor, with duplicate reports being sent directly to the Emperor. A MOF has command over a military sector group and is responsible for the security of the entire sector. Being responsible for hundreds of systems, MOFs take a personal interest in only a handful of worlds. For the rest, they rely upon communications with their subordinate governors and then upon reports from intelligence units within their sector group. It is not unusual for a MOF to also serve as a governor of a particularly favored world within the sector. I think that paragraph, that line there, is to explain why they call Tarkin a governor, right? Because he was a Grand Moff, but Leia calls him governor because he was from his homeworld, Iriedu. He was the governor of that planet. I think that's why they came up with that line right there. Outer Rim jobs are tough to find. Tehillim 29's in the house. That is why the Outer Rim wasn't under the Empire's grip as the regions. Yeah. It's true. Grand Moffs. There are planets in every sector in the Empire which cause more than their share of problems for the Emperor. Controlling these worlds is difficult, and the Moffs have found that the troubles are infectious, spreading from system to system from the source. The situation is made more difficult by the fact that the infection of freedom has no respect for sector boundaries. Coordinating efforts between sectors is often impossible to accomplish in time to stop the spread of the unrest. The Moffs have the resources to handle crises on a dozen or more worlds, but if the trouble cannot be contained to those planets, the Empire's grasp on an entire sector may be weakened. Taking on the advice of one of his Moffs, Tarkin, the Emperor formed priority sectors. A priority sector is a sector consisting of systems on which signs of unrest have recently been detected, or systems which are in regular contact with systems in which unrest is chronic. A priority sector often crosses the boundaries of standard sectors, containing the worlds from a dozen or more sectors. The title of Grand Moff is granted to the being in charge of a priority sector. The theory behind priority sectors, codified in the Tarkin Doctrine, is that Grand Moffs will be able to react quickly to problems when they are small, eliminating them before they have a chance to grow and spread. Grand Moffs are therefore given complete freedom to act as they see fit, without giving advance warning to the Moffs or planetary governors of their actions. The number of Grand Moffs is growing, and the resources given to each Grand Moff is also increasing. The Emperor personally appoints each Grand Moff, and they report directly to him. Each Grand Moff commands at least 2 sector groups, so the equivalent in other military resources. Some Grand Moffs are given even greater military strength if their priority is of crucial importance to the Empire. And then, there's the picture right there, right? There's your greater military strength. Priority sectors are the first to receive experimental equipment. There you go. That's the Death Star. And it talks about how the Moffs don't like the Grand Moffs because they feel like they're just tactically dealing with the situation and not strategically and long-term dealing with situations with rebellion. And then it talks about the advisors and how the advisors work. Those guys that were on the shuttle with him on the Death Star and stuff. Those guys pretty much run the Empire for the Emperor. They talk to the Moffs and tell them what to do and say, this is what we're going to do. And this section right here goes into, he creates rivalries and makes them in charge of worlds where the other guys are from, so you don't get a lot of selfishness and stuff and ways to backstab each other. So it's like a check and balance type of system, which is brilliant. The Royal Guard, those guys in the red. I don't know how much you guys know about them, but let's read this really quick. The Imperial Royal Guard is a special detachment of hand-picked Imperial stormtroopers who serve as the Emperor's personal guards. Each of these soldiers is specially scrutinized to fit select size, strength, intelligence, and loyalty requirements. And equipment and training is lavished upon them. No firm figures are available on the exact number of royal guards serving the Emperor, but speculation ranges from fewer than 50 to tens of thousands. Whatever the case, the Royal Guard has become a formidable military subunit, which is directly under the control of the Emperor. So we see in the prequels where they really kind of came from the Coruscant Guard, right? The Red Guards existed before the establishment of the Empire. In Revenge of the Sith, we saw them in the background. The entire Royal Guard is never sent on combat missions. A few small elements of the Guard are sent into combat on a rotating basis to keep them in fighting trim. On such missions, Guard members usually dispense with their ceremonial uniform and don the armor worn by stormtroopers in the operation. In such instances, the Guard members are always part of the same unit. They are never dispersed among the ordinary army units. Rumors abound about this fierce fighting force. The legend is that no Royal Guard member has yet been killed in combat. Stories tell of their invincible fighting prowess, always in service of the Emperor. Royal Guards wear garb consisting of flowing red robes, red battle armor, and red helmets. Although ceremonial, the red armor does not hamper guardsmen in regards to movement or fighting. This armor is derived from a pair of similar designs, the uniforms of the Death Watch of the Mandalore system and the Sun Guards of the Thyrsis system. So there you go. Death Watch established in 1989. Freaking awesome. That the armor resembles those of units with such ferocious reputations is no accident. And the red glint of the Imperial Royal Guard armor inspires fear in the hardest of men. So kind of gives their stats right here and stuff, because this is a role-playing game book, right? Then we'll read about the Emperor in a minute. Matt Wilkins is in the house talking about rim jobs. That's great. Rim jobs aren't easy. Thanks for showing up, Matt. I sent you a text yesterday. Blue-eyed Scorpio is here. You can occupy every planet in every solar system. Let's see you do it, pal. Let's see you do it. The Emperor. The Emperor is a small man, clothed in robes intentionally reminiscent of harmless ascetics on scores of worlds. He walks with the aid of a gnarled walking stick on the wall back here. He appears old, fragile, entirely incapable of running the most ruthless empire in the history of the galaxy. This appearance is one of the Emperor's many masterful deceptions. The Emperor's genius and strength with the Force gave him unique insight into the governed races. He knows that the Old Republic was as much a symbol as a reality to many, just as he knows that the Jedi Knights were the remaining untarnished incarnation of that symbol. Working as he had in the Senate, he carefully cultivated the destruction of the Jedi. So again, they can't go into the Clone Wars and all that stuff in 1989, but that's exactly what happened. With the Jedi gone, all pretense for restoring the Republic was abandoned. The Emperor's true ambition has finally been revealed, to be the sole master of more than 1,000 worlds. Under his guidance, the Emperor continues to grow in power, despite the momentary setback suffered at the Battle of Yavin. So, pretty spot on what we've read so far, right? You've got to leave out certain details, but they did a great job of not setting themselves up to be contradicted and stuff. You could say, oh, look at the title of president versus Supreme Chancellor. But again, that's what the novelization of New Hope did. They used the title president. I kind of like it more anyway because it ties it to the real world better. But Supreme Chancellor also has a certain ring to it as well. So they talk about the holonet here and S-threads, which would really become prominent in the expanded universe. You can use it to track ships, because basically if you put an S-thread tracker on a ship, it will pass through holonet communication lines, and then the S-thread tracker will be picked up on those lines. So that's kind of how they track ships through hyperspace. They go into that in Kraken's Rebel Field Guide, which came out several years after this. So this is interesting here. This is the note that Tarkin sent Palpatine that became known as the Tarkin Doctrine. And you watch New Hope, right? And you see that Tarkin is a guy with balls. That's what you get out of this guy. He just has balls. So he writes the Emperor a letter. There it says right there, Governor Tarkin, Siswana Sector Iriedu, his homeworld. Your Majesty, it has recently come to my attention that what had previously been the quiet grumbling of malcontents on backwater worlds has become dissidents in more civilized systems. Your Majesty will forgive me if I am repeating foundless rumors, but I have heard there is even armed defiance in some sectors. Coupled with increased resistance to your plans from hot-headed young senators, gee, wonder who he's talking about, this has given me pause to think about our security arrangements. I myself have been frustrated chasing pirate bands in my sector, only to have them leap deep into another sector where my forces cannot follow without running into conflict with another Moff and the advisor who supports him. If the scattered armed resistance should become organized, They will doubtless learn from the example of other criminal brethren. Granting any rebels the advantage of elusiveness is foolhardy. I have also noticed that even the excellent pace with which your majesty is strengthening his fleets can scarcely provide the security for the empire should a significant number of planets begin to defy your will. We are many years away from a force vast enough to secure every system simultaneously. I therefore wish that you would consider my recommendations on the following points. To provide a swift, systematic response to rebellion as it appears, rather than waiting until it is entrenched, I suggest the formation of over-sectors. Sectors consisting of systems in which rebellion is newly born, or systems which maintain frequent contact with systems in chronic unrest. These over-sectors would be formed without regard for the boundaries of standard sectors. The forces of an over-sector would be able to respond to threats quickly while the threats are small. Liquidating a dozen small threats is easier than rooting out one well-established center of defiance. As an over-sector is created only from problem worlds, they should be given a greater quantity of forces than an ordinary sector. I would think that 3 sector groups should be the average. Given the command of an over-sector to a single individual who reports directly to you, this will bypass any delays created by political opportunism in your advisors. Balls. Cannibalize existing holonet transceivers, modify them for use, and put them in the flagship of every sector group in an over-sector command. Place similar facilities within His Majesty's command ship and within Imperial City. This will enable your forces to respond to threats in minutes rather than hours or days after the fact. Imperial forces will be able to coordinate to a degree impossible among an enemy whose fastest means of communication is a rendezvous at a common system. Rule through fear of force rather than force itself. So that line right there is the Tarkin Doctrine. If we use our strength wisely, we shall cow thousands of worlds which might otherwise consider rebellion to some degree. We can do this through superior coordination and manipulation of information. For example, over-sector groups could coordinate to make a series of devastating attacks upon known planets of resistance, taking care to eliminate any fleeing vessels capable of making hyperspace. The operation would take several days in order to jump to all suspect planets in the area of operation. After the operation, we could report to the media that a single over-sector group conducted a single-day operation without specifying the day, which was successful in eliminating resistance on each of the worlds included in the operation, granting the citizens the impression of an overwhelming force, one against which resistance would be futile, would certainly reduce the chance of a citizen fostering such resistance. And then he kind of closes up here. But yeah, I like that they sat down and wrote this out. You know, like this is what Tarkin wrote to Palpatine. That's badass. Again, he had balls. Matt Wilkins says he loved the Weston Game Sourcebook. Such awesome information. And Matt, I mentioned earlier that I'm working on the draft script for my next article, which is on the second book, the source book. I've just been really busy, so I've got to find time to get back to that. Steven Salcedo's Film and Gaming Blogosphere is with us. Chapter 2, COMPNOR. So, what COMPNOR is, and here's kind of the org chart. It's basically the mustache guy 1939 youth, if you know what I mean. It started out as a citizen organization that became official. And you have the emperor at the top, his advisors, the select committee, Then you have the sub-adult group, education, recruitment, motivation, recruitment, progress, and all these things in culture that they micromanage. Comp Force is like a military wing of it. They'll show some pictures of them later. And then the ISB, right? The Imperial Security Bureau. Separate from Imperial Intelligence. Worse than Imperial Intelligence. And all of their departments. Surveillance, investigation, internal affairs, interrogation, re-education, which is kind of scary, and enforcement. What's cool about this, they use a lot of the concept art in the book to represent different things, but this is supposed to be a Comp Force trooper, and that's obviously some concept art from one of the movies that they're using. Then they get into Imperial Intelligence, the actual like military intelligence, and here's its org chart. I love how they have all the detail in here. Another name for Imperial Intelligence, the Ubiquitate. And they just flat out admit they have an assassination department under the Bureau wing. More concept art used as a Imperial Intelligence security member. Apparently, he's like a Panama Jack type of guy, right? Assassin droid. Another one. And then lots of full color pullouts and stuff. Not really a pullout, but pages in here, and they have the rank insignias, and this is not accurate. It had to be overridden a couple of times, but the one on the upper left here, that's what Tarkin's wearing, right? And then the Admiral one you see like Piet wearing in Empire Strikes Back, and so on. And this is pretty cool. We see all these guys in the films except the Sea Trooper. So I thought that was kind of cool based on the same style of armor as the Scout Trooper. And then, of course, the 0G Mark 1 Stormtrooper armor. So fans of Battletech will love that. Then they get into the military. Got the naval troopers that we see in all the films. TIE pilots. Imperial gunners, who they reveal are like pretty much failed pirates. These guys were pilots. They were good at shooting, but not very good at flying. So they were made gunners. There's the naval trooper. There's so much information, guys. Then they get into ships. Like, they invented so many new ships here. Gamma class assault shuttle. The skip ray blast boat that Timothy Zahn liked to use a lot in his early works. System patrol craft. Diagram of the assault shuttle there. Strike class cruiser. Escort carrier. Lancer class frigate. The interdictor cruiser that became really prominent in the expanded universe, that can keep ships from going out of hyperspace. Something we're going to talk about tomorrow night on the spacing, by the way. Hyperspace and how it works. Someone made a good point about this very ship yesterday. Let's see. The Star Galleon, and then, of course, the Dreadnought that was one of the focal points of the Heir to the Empire trilogy with the Dark Force, the Katana fleet. Carrot class cruiser torpedo sphere. And what this thing does right here, it shoots like 500 proton torpedoes at a planetary shield. It momentarily weakens it, and it times like a turbo laser blast to go through the shield as it's momentarily weakened and destroy the shield generator. So pretty inventive there. Victory class Star Destroyer. The Imperial Star Destroyer. Then they call it the Super Star Destroyer. And 8,000 meters is what they came up with, but we know that was retcon to be, 16 point something. It's much bigger than they list here, because if you look on screen, like if you go from here to here, there's one Star Destroyer, so you do the length there. Yeah, it's about 10 lengths, which would be about 16,000 meters, which is huge. Then size comparison. And what's hilarious, here's the stern of the Super Star Destroyer, and it continues on all these pages. Several pages to show how long it is. Talks about weapons and stuff. There's the Juggernaut that we know was used in the prequels, right? So it came from this book, which in turn, I believe, came from a Joe Johnston sketch. Someone correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but I believe Joe Johnston or somebody had sketched like instead of the walkers, they might have used this for Hoth. So here it is. They actually put it into a drawing. Little tanks and stuff like that. So you could use all this information to just populate your adventure, or if you're writing a story like Timothy Zahn did. And this is like an in-universe ad for the Skip Ray Blast Boat by Sinar Fleet Systems. Same thing here with diagrams of the ties. Some concept art and photo from the film. Size comparison chart. And this is to scale, so tells you how big an AT-AT is compared to some of the other vessels. Oh, and then this goes into huge detail, the way that the Army is organized, and, you know, squads and platoons and companies and regiments and all that. It's just crazy the detail that they put into this. And a lot of these little blurbs with stories and stuff are fun to read. They go into the mouse droids here that we see on the Death Star and Star Destroyers, and how the Empire wound up with a bunch of them. And then here's like a Army company level org chart type of thing. The way it's broken out. So much detail. Let's see. Still going on here. And then they get into like the way the fleets are organized. Just like with the Army squadron level. Sector group. And then they go into weapons. Like we saw the rebels using that, right? Ion cannon. I mean, it's chock full of information here. Some more pictures from the film. More concept art. This is like obviously for Hoth and snowtroopers that eventually evolved into AT-ATs, but here they're calling it something else. Recruitment, training, and indoctrination. I mean, just so much detail on the military and stuff. They go into how basic training works. If you're joining the Imperial military. Then they had this little ad at the end with some of the other products at the time. I mean, I used to go to the comic shop and ask them, hey, when is the next Star Wars role-playing book going to come out? And they'd tell me, or else I'd call West End Games in Hunsdale, Pennsylvania, and a nice lady would answer the phone, and she'd say, oh, yeah, here's what we have coming out soon. And I would be first in line to get it. But yeah, just chock full, guys, of information here. And all the authors would use this, right? Timothy Zahn was sent a box of this, probably Rebel Alliance source book, because he used a couple of vehicles from it, probably the source book, and whatever else had come out by that time in 89, 90 when he was writing Heir to the Empire. And he adhered to it, and a lot of the other authors did too, the Bantam authors in the 90s. A lot of care went into writing these books. You can tell they didn't just throw something together. If you look at some of the other role-playing books, let's take Star Trek, for example, and I mentioned this in my canon documentary, that they're not canon and no attempt was made to make them canon. Now, that's not to say I don't like what they put in those books. I like the Klingon culture that they came up with, for example, but there was no attempt for the license holders to say, hey, we're going to keep this in line and consistent with the stories that we write from here on out. In fact, they veered so much that Paramount pulled the license in 88 or 89 because they thought it was becoming too warlike or something like that. But with Star Wars, a lot of care went into making sure that this stuff was consistent and it was usable in the books and comics. And it was. Nothing really contradicts anything. I mean, listen to what I read earlier, right, about the formation of the Empire. Totally in line with movies that wouldn't come out for another decade after this came out. So very impressive. You wonder how hard they are to find. I don't know. I haven't needed to look for them, but they go for a fortune. Some of them do, but they're on PDF. I mean, look, this is what I'm looking at here. If you just Google these, you can usually find them out there. I think there's one website specifically that has almost all of them in PDF format, and pretty decent PDF format too, I might add. Soul Assassin. Did they go into detail about how if you don't know your last name and you're alone, they give you the name Solo? No, nothing stupid like that, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I should say. Yeah, that was stupid. When I read that, I was actually reading it on a flight because I had saved the PDF to my phone and I had finished reading the novel that I had on my phone. So I said, well, let me read some from the Imperial Sourcebook. Hadn't read it in a long time. I'm like, man, I'm going to go live and talk about this because I was so impressed by how spot on and accurate it was. Fuck Norris is with us. Keely Chow is with us. Make sure you guys are hitting the like button. So yeah, I would highly recommend getting this book. And most of the other West End books, they're just, if you like lore and stuff like that, they're in technical diagrams and everything, it's everything all in one about the Empire. It's amazing. What's great about it, it doesn't have like, oh, here's a chapter on Darth Vader. There's a million other books with Darth Vader information, right? This is more about stuff you don't know about the Empire, and that's what's cool about it. It's not just repeating this stuff you already know that you've seen in the movies. Oh, great. We greeted you earlier, so great. Thanks for being here. Yeah, so do you guys have any questions about this or any other Star Wars questions, be they expanded universe or not? You want to try to stump the dean here? You guys want to try to stump the dean? Stump the professor? Bring it on. And here's the thing, when you think about the Empire, right? It's easy to, just like Justin and Spamton are talking about here, it's easy to think of what you've seen recently. And hey, look, he has the same uniform on, and he has the same blaster model, and maybe he sounds like an Imperial, and if he shoots his blaster, it sounds like a Star Wars blaster, right? But it doesn't bring you comfort. There's a difference between, hey, there's a little bit of familiarity there, but it just doesn't seem right. But when you look at a book like this, it feels right. There's comfort there because it's consistent with what we saw in the films and just what George intended. It's almost like you can just pick up on it and sense it. You don't have to ask anyone, hey, is this something that is real Star Wars? You read it, you digest it, and you just know that it's real Star Wars. That's what's so great about these books pre-2014. Yeah, so let's see something here. If you guys don't have any questions at all, then we can start wrapping it up. But ask me anything about Star Wars you've ever wondered, or what videos you want to see on the lore, and I can start making a list. So I want to start getting more into that stuff. Evergreen videos are the future, and we've got to find a way where our lore videos can make as much success as like Six Planes can. That's ridiculous. Yeah, you don't even know what questions to ask, huh? She's busy basting her turkey, Soul Assassin. Come on. But yeah, tell friends, and let's grow the channel. We got a new member tonight. The Gatekeeper is Daimyo. So what we're going to be doing tomorrow night, we're going to go live, or I'm sorry, Friday night. We're going to go live Friday night for the spacing. And obviously big news to talk about. And other news you might have missed if you're not on X. Something went down with, you saw it on the thumbnail. It's Pablo Hidalgo. Something went down with him, so we're going to talk about that. Probably going to talk about some non-Star Wars news. And because Blake cried, everybody gets to do an alternative factory entry. We've got some expanded bootyverse. We're just going to have fun, have some drinks, and spend Black Friday talking to the chat. But tomorrow is Thanksgiving in the United States, so everyone who celebrates, happy Thanksgiving. Have a good couple of days off here. Justin says, do you like the ending of Legacy of the Force, or do you think Jaina was wasted? No, I like the ending of it. I mean, I don't want to write it for them. If I just finished reading that like a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, and I thought it was fine. I thought it was a good stopping point to echo Ryan's thoughts from his live stream last night. I'm not really so much into Fate of the Jedi. It gets a little wonky for me, but Legacy is where it's at. It's just a fantastic story, and that's what should have been the real sequel trilogy, not Heir to the Empire, because the ages would have been right or close to it, and they could have just had a great story with the new generation and kind of showing how there's some it's like poetry, it rhymes type of thing, but at the same time different too than the stories told in the prequels. I think Legacy of the Force should have been the real sequel trilogy, not Heir to the Empire. Why is there so little recorded about the time before the Old Republic? You mean like in universe? Is that what you mean? Like in universe? Well, in reality, we know the answer is because they were told to steer clear of that. But it is interesting how in the 80s, 90s, you're reading stuff and they mention Jedi and they act like it was 1,000 years ago, right? And it was like 20, 25 years before. So it is interesting. Your voice will be heard. Love the series. Feel like the ending let you down. Totally get what they were going for, but I don't know. Well, tell us more. Like, why did it let you down? I thought it had a good denouement. Thought it wrapped things up fine. Yep, good series. Oh yeah, it's definitely the weakest. Tell you about the Sun Crusher. So a little starfighter sized ship that's nearly invincible that had a torpedo that could be fired into a planet or sun and destroy it. That's basically what the Sun Crusher was. A little bit of a silly concept. Yeah, so she trained with Boba Fett and some other Mandalorians. Not really used much. I think there was that duel. It was kind of like a group duel. I'm trying to think of where they were. They were in some kind of a conference room, not conference room, more of like a meeting type of center. I think she used it a lot of the training during that fight scene, I believe. I'd have to go back and flip through the books and try and remember, but I think some of it was used. But yeah, that was probably just more to play for future storylines, to be honest. I think they were. That's one negative thing about it, and I think that a lot of books now and especially TV shows do this. They try to prepare for the future a little too much instead of focusing on the story that they're telling now, because everything has to have an arc now. Babylon 5 did it, and then suddenly everything has to have an arc now. Everything. Perfect Sun Crusher description. Yeah. Maybe you were distracted. Yeah, one of these days I'll reread it, but I got a lot of other stuff I got to read. And I got to work on my creative project, find time to do that too. But anyway, guys, hour and 36 minutes. It's a good time to call it. I hope you enjoyed looking at what these guys wrote. Greg Gordon and others wrote in 1988, 89, and being pretty much spot on. I'd like to find out, did they get any insights, any documentation from Lucasfilm to make sure that they were accurate? Because if not, then pretty brilliant stuff, or George actually consulted it to roughly keep it in line. I don't know. Chicken and the egg, right? But it had to be more than just that little section in the A New Hope novelization. It had to be more than that because it was pretty spot on. But anyway, guys, yeah, we will be back 10:05 Central PM, obviously, for the Spacing Friday night. It's going to be a big one, so make sure you're there. We're going to give our thoughts. We're going to call out the usual suspects, and Yavin Base broadcast will return at the beginning of the stream, so you'll enjoy that. What else? Oh, yeah, happy Thanksgiving once again to anyone celebrating in the States. Have some turkey, have a drink, and spend time with family, guys. Thanks for being here. We will see you Friday night.
The Expanded University, imaginative and boundless.